Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The New Standard. The New Standard is hosted by yours truly, Lance Williams, and my co-host Neil Coulong. What's up, Big Neil?
I'm still reveling in the fun of Hall of Fame weekend, watching the Steelers legends get together, hearing a lot of old Steelers stories, getting to see people with those terrible towels down in Canton. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy what's going on now, and I'm looking forward to another performance tonight, Sunday night. We'll see Big Nasty Alan Faneca finally get in the Hall of Fame, even if it is 24 hours after Steve Hutchinson, when at least it should have been the other way around. I'll deal with that. We'll deal with that some other time.
Hey, Neil, man, that's perfect for being just an absolute red ass about that. Because I felt the same way, but and it's great. And see that's what happens when you're a Steeler fan. Is that even when you have success, you can still be a red ass about it, and it's all acceptable because guess what? I'm pretty sure that Neil speaks for all of Steelers Nation. Big up the Steelers Freak for getting into the live chat early with a question. Steelers Freak is ready to roll, and we're going to
It's not a question.
Oh, it's a statement. Well, Steelers Freak is just
He doesn't ask questions.
I mean, yeah, he doesn't make. Yeah, he just makes proclamations because he's the freak. He's the freak of the industry, Steelers Freak. But before we get into the program, and the title of the program is obviously "Should the Steelers Worry About Signing T.J. Watt?" But before we get into that, I want to let you know that the podcast is available on YouTube. Do a search for The New Standard with Neil Coulong's name attached or my name attached. And please like and subscribe to the program. Also, the pod is available on all streaming platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast, you will find the show. Before we jump into the show, big shout out to some show sponsors: Great Dads versus Everybody. Big up to Shop Supreme Queen. Big up to my wife's Mary Kay business, named the Rookie of the Year. Congratulations to the wife for doing a fantastic job with her Mary Kay business. Also, big shout out to Nothing But Bud Butter. And big shout out to my guy, Charlie Bell, and his company, AssistToScore.com, for youth sports apparel. Make sure you check those guys out. Everybody else, you can find them on their IG, and I'll have that in the description of the show. And let's jump into the question at the top, in the title of the show. Should the Steelers worry about signing TJ Watt? We alluded to some of the things that came out, and let me read a tweet from Mark Cabali of The Athletic. He said Keith Butler acknowledged that TJ Watt isn't practicing because he has yet to sign his contract. And let me frame the question. The question is obviously, should the Steelers worry about signing TJ Watt? But I also want to kind of frame it this way with that question, and also it's a two-parter. Is this a holdout? Sort of, kind of.
I'll make a lot of enemies with this among Steeler Nation, but yeah, it is a holdout.
Exactly.
Here's the thing: he's not allowed to hold out. That's why he's doing what he's doing. So he is literally showing up and not doing anything. Whatever you want to call that, fine. But let's not confuse what this really is, because in reality, Lance, you know this as well as I do, if this is a player that fans don't particularly like for one reason or another, they're freaking out about this. It's because they worship the ground TJ Watt walks on. They're going to make excuses until the cows come home of why he's not practicing. Fact of the matter is, he's not practicing, and now Butler, for whatever reason, he exposed the secret that anybody that can watch the team and recognize what they're doing knew. This is contract related. And I'm not even saying I'm for or against whatever, but the amount of excuses that I heard from fans about why TJ Watt wasn't practicing was just embarrassing. I mean, it's not because they're saving him. It's not because they have 4 preseason games. It's not because he doesn't need the practice. He needs to be out there for sure. Mike Tomlin would want him out there, all things being equal. They want to get him signed, but here's the other thing, and I would disagree with Mr. Freak as far as the viability of TJ Watt signing with this team. You don't seem to realize what he's capable of asking for, what he's probably going to ask for. He is going to get an unprecedented contract for Pittsburgh by their standards. Teams do not just easily break everything that they do from a business standpoint because of this player or that player if he is not a quarterback. Okay. TJ Watt is not a quarterback. He's not going to be a quarterback. He does not have the value of a quarterback. He just simply doesn't. Don't tell me that he does, because he doesn't. He, though, based on the market, and you really can blame Joey Bosa for this, because Joey Bosa at this point has really proved to be a good player, and one who is noticeably below the level of TJ Watt. Two schools of thought on that. You're not paying a player for what he's done. You're paying a player for what he's going to do, what he's expected to do.
Say that again. Say that again.
A player is paid for what he's expected to do, not what he has done, especially when he's 25, 26 years old. TJ Watt is, by all accounts, one of the two best defensive players in the game. I don't think that can be disputed by anybody. The fact that he has not won a Defensive Player of the Year award, I think, is arbitrary, considering he's been runner-up for 2 consecutive years. I'm not sure how many times that's happened. The guy he lost to last year is Aaron freaking Donald, who might end up the best defensive player who's ever played. Keep that in mind. And it was an extremely close decision. You could have gone either way, in my opinion, with that. TJ Watt was not robbed of it either year. He was a very strong candidate in 2 of those years. But getting back to Bosa, okay, Joey Bosa's contract, what was it, $135 million over 5 years, something to that effect. 102 of it guaranteed, 73 of it guaranteed up front. Okay, those are numbers the Steelers have never even come close to paying a defensive player. Never. No, not within a long shot. Keep in mind, this is the key thing to all of it. They don't have to pay him right now. They do not have to pay him. They can tag him next year for like 17, 18 million. We've seen them use the tag pretty often over the last couple seasons. There is no reason to think, based on Pittsburgh's recent track record, that they're not intending to tag him next year. And that might be why Watt isn't practicing. And I wouldn't blame him for that. If they're saying, no, we're not going to talk to you about what your market value is, which is obvious based on what Myles Garrett got in Cleveland, which was, call it, this isn't exact, but call it 10% less than what Bosa got in Los Angeles. Watt's deal, it statistically needs to be over those 2 contracts. And Pittsburgh, doing just under those 2 contracts, would be signing a deal that they've never even come close to giving to a defensive player. They don't have a quarterback signed, but here's what I know. Everyone telling me up and down that Pittsburgh's going to be 11-6 this season or whatever. You're not drafting a quarterback with that record. So if you're not any good and you don't draft a quarterback next season, you're going to have to pay either Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins in 2023. That's when TJ Watt, the big dollars of TJ Watt's deal, based on what the market is today, would come into play. They're analyzing all of this. They're putting all of that together. So don't even act like this is a surefire thing. It's not. They probably want to tag him next year. On a valuation level, it would be much better for the Steelers to tag, then give him a 5-year extension, because you get that $17 million valuation in year 1, which is a lot less than the cash that they're going to have to pay TJ Watt up front to give him the market deal that he really has earned. He is absolutely entitled to get, and he would get on an open market.
You made a lot of good points. And before I give you my points, I want to ask one question. What's the impact of COVID? Is COVID having any impact on the Steelers? I wouldn't say hesitancy, but I'll just use that to do this deal. And secondly, we both believe that the Steelers are sexy tanking. Now, there's been some rumors about, Ben, it's year to year, we'll see, and all that good stuff. I don't believe that. Just how valuable is a TJ Watt on a team that may not be very good if they don't have a quarterback? So
that's an excellent question, isn't it?
Look at those 2 things. I mean, is it COVID? And if they're not going to have a quarterback, and if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a future. Is COVID impacting the contract or maybe delaying it? And is there some uncertainty around the quarterback position delaying it as well?
How about this? Before we even get into the COVID part, TJ Watt, understandably, probably the best edge rusher in the NFL. Alex Highsmith played a phenomenal game against Dallas on Thursday night. You liked what you saw out of him. Quincy Roche is a player that they picked up in the 6th round. He had a sack on a highly advanced move for a rookie pass rusher. These are players they picked up on the cheap in the draft. And if Highsmith made a pretty decent impact as a rookie, not Watt level, but he also wasn't taken in the first round. You sign Mel Ingram for $4 million. That's a trio of pass rushers that, let's just say for argument's sake, can step in and create the kind of pressure that Pittsburgh tends to develop as a team. Keep in mind, they paid Stephon Tuitt. They paid Cam Hayward. They're going to pay Devin Bush. They're going to pay Minkah Fitzpatrick. All these guys factor into that. How much do you want to spend on the one guy that puts up the sexy stats? Now, I get totally how good he is, but you have to understand from a business perspective, the Steelers need to save as much money as they can because that's going to be a massive contract to a team that will eventually have to pay a quarterback somewhere, whatever that's going to be. So as far as the COVID piece goes, you and I talked offline ahead of time. Forbes came out recently with their valuations for all the teams in the NFL. According to their numbers, the Steelers operated on a $24.5 million operating income last year. Seems to me like they made money. They've got cash coming in. I know who knows that. It's TJ Watt's agent. He's well aware of that. We also know the league just entered into a significant TV rights deal with several outlets, media, streaming, all of that. That's going to kick into effect in 2 years. All of these things are things that Watt's representation is looking at and saying the market's going to increase and we should be on top of all these guys anyway. So there's no hometown discount here. Hometown discount right now is 10% over Joey Bosa. Yes. That's it. We can ask for a lot more and we can get it. Yeah, we know that you're going to tag us. So I'm going to tell you now, you tag us, it's 50% above Joey Bosa. And someone's going to pay my client that. You put us in the open market right now, someone will pay that. So ball's in your court. And the Steelers are saying, well, we'll just tag him. And Watt then says, all right, well, I'm not going to practice because I'm playing probably half of what I should be getting paid this season. And there's no point in me risking it if we're not going to do that.
So one last question again before I get to my point. How does that work, right? I'm not getting paid. I'm sexy holding out, so I've taken my top off, but not my pants, right? So, I'm sexy holding out, right? So how does that work logistically? Is he on site? It
seems like he shows up, he hangs out, he runs sprints on the side, he eats lunch, and goes to his room. I mean, that's pretty much it.
How does that work? Like, does he
I don't know. The reason we don't know specifics on this is the first year, the new collective bargaining agreement that they signed last year. This is the first year in which it says emphatically teams cannot waive fines for missing training camp. So every team is obligated to fine a player who doesn't show up to training camp. So they can't hold out. A player can't hold out and dare a team to fine them to miss on a day-to-day basis. I guarantee you that's why Aaron Rodgers is in camp and didn't push for more and, kind of to not have to go through the rigors of training camp. It's because he has to be fined. And it's like up to $50,000 a day. That's a lot of money, even for an Aaron Rodgers to have to pay out. Yeah. They're not going to want to do that. So he's showing up. He's just not doing anything except for running sprints on the sideline, which, to be honest with you, the only reason he's doing that is because there are reporters on site and to at least show that he's doing something while he's there. Probably not going to get hurt running wind sprints. And if he did, then he's got a much bigger problem on his hands than not practicing. He needs to be in shape and he knows that, but he's not going to engage in any, significant contact drills or anything until he gets his contract. That is a holdout. I don't know what anybody else wants to argue with me about it. And the only reason they are is because, again, they worship the ground that TJ Watt walks on. The reality is he's holding out. He's holding out for a contract. I'm not even saying I disagree with what he's doing. I'm just saying that is it. Don't put lipstick and a dress on a pig and call it something else. That bothers me to no degree. Exactly. The local fans know that this is nothing serious. It depends on how you want to define serious. Okay. He's not practicing until he gets a contract. He's going to play in the season. That's for sure. It suggests to me that he's not real happy with the contract that he has. Bingo. And if you don't think that that's a serious situation, I don't know what to tell you. Again, this is covering up for TJ Watt because we think TJ Watt is fine. I guarantee you, Lance, if Minkah Fitzpatrick did this, everyone would freak out. And maybe you know why, but yes. To me, there's no reason why TJ Watt should not be held to the fire the same way several players who have done more or less what he's doing right now have done. And again, I'm not even saying that I am for or against it. I am saying, though, the idea here that the media are on one side or the other is absolutely ridiculous. Watt is the one doing this. It has nothing to do with the media. He's not practicing. He's giving reps to other guys to step in and play, which is fine. But what it suggests to me is they do not have an amicable situation on their hands regarding TJ Watt's contractual future with the team. And you can't argue that.
And I've heard that spun as well, that and I thought that was the most laughable, that TJ kind of sitting out and doing his thing was really helping the team out by getting other guys reps. That was like the most ridiculous.
Gotta be kidding me.
That was the most ridiculous thing.
Like, wow, you'll just shovel whatever they tell you to. I mean,
yeah, that was ridiculous. And to Lee Pate's point, big up to Lee Pate. Thanks for hopping onto the program. He said local media and fans know this is nothing serious. National media will make it out to be like it's some huge friction. I'm just going to say this.
I don't know what to tell you.
I'm just going to say this. I have friction with people when I think they're shorting me $50.
Yeah.
Let alone
truth.
Let alone hashtag facts, as people like to say now. I have beef if you're trying to short me 50. And I know you owe me 50. There's a certain said person that owes me a bet, on a game that we bet years ago and still owes me the bet. So, but again, I'm just a regular dude, right? When you make more money, your concern about money doesn't lessen, it increases. So I'm sure he feels like I'm the best edge rusher in football. My brother has gotten paid handsomely. It's time for me to get some chips. And that's the other thing I don't think that's being mentioned in this is he has a boilerplate to this. He knows how this works with his brother JJ.
Which is why I said he was going to hold out last year.
Exactly.
Simply because JJ did the same thing. And JJ got the highest contract in NFL history at the time that he had signed it.
I mean, you're going to have two brothers, if TJ stays on this arc, that are going to the Hall of Fame. And we'll talk about the Hall of Fame weekend, which was absolutely incredible. It just shows the depth of talent and just from all different levels of how well the Steeler organization has been run, from personnel to coaching to players, and that synergy of all three and how that resulted in gold jackets generationally, which was just ridiculous. But anyway, we'll talk about that. TJ ain't happy. Now, I don't know to the level of what that is, but when a ball player who respects the craft, and again, he respects the craft because of his brothers and the commitment. They're a ball family. They play ball. They understand the importance of ball and how football has changed the Watt family financially, generationally. They understand the importance of the NFL and being compensated fairly and what that means. He's not happy. He would like this to happen where, look, man, I've had more production than any defensive player in the history of the franchise in my first several years. Pay me. Like, this shouldn't be hard, dog. Like, I pay, I play, I perform, you pay. Like, that's just the way that this happens.
You are not giving me the security that somebody in my position should have.
Yes.
You're making me play into the last year of my contract.
Yes.
I am grossly underpaid.
Facts.
I am incredibly talented and productive. All of these things, again, this really comes down to how you want to define a serious issue. To me, bottom lining it, if TJ Watt is unhappy with his contract, there's a problem, and that's something to be concerned with. Also, fact that you have to look at, that matters here, the Steelers do not give out signing bonuses to the level that Watt can easily command. Okay.
Easily.
Joey Bosa, once again, it's the best comparable contract on the market. $35 million signing bonus and a $7 million roster bonus due that year. That means they paid him $42 million on top of his salary for that season. The Steelers do not pay out that much money in one season to one player. They don't. Okay. Ask Cam Hayward. Why do you think Cam Hayward got a huge advance in March? It's because they gave him a roster bonus in year 2 after he signed the contract. So he had to play through that year 1 before being able to get that money. That's how the Steelers structure their contracts. They put it into kind of a year-by-year structure. We're going to give you some upfront. We'll give you a $15 million signing bonus. And then we're going to take the other half of your market signing bonus and put it into a roster bonus in year 2. So in other words, you play through year 1, you make it to March, you're doing everything that we want you to do. you got another one coming. Then we'll restructure your contract. We'll make it into a signing bonus. We'll probably put it onto your game check, and you'll get it throughout the season guaranteed. That's how they structure things. Other teams don't do it like that. I'm not saying the Steelers can't. I'm not saying that they won't. I'm saying that they don't, and that's a fact. So the money that TJ Watt per market right now, in other words, not my invention, not the media's creation, not his agent's desire, the market, what has been signed for players of a similar ability as him, shows he can get 3 times what the Steelers have given in a signing bonus to a defensive player, and at the same level of a signing bonus that they've given Ben Roethlisberger. If you think that that's something that's just going to change, I don't know what to tell you. He would have been signed by now. He would not be skipping camp or whatever you want to call it. He would not be showing up to run 5 wind sprints and drink water all day. He'd be doing something. He's not. That is a problem.
Yes, it is a problem. And I think Lee hit it on the head. And big up to Lee Pate again for another comment. Fans also have to start having a different mindset about the new generation of players, and that it's a good chance we will only have a player for 4 to 5 years after drafting them, and to not get too attached. And Lee hit it on the head. And to the other points that I had around this, I think you're absolutely 100% right, Neil. This is a holdout because of who it is, and because he's, and I'm using this term intentionally, the golden boy. And you can define that in as many ways as you like. That's me trying to say what I'd like to say without saying what I'd like to say. Say that a couple of times. See, you see how
we hated Le'Veon Bell for doing a lot of the same stuff.
Exactly.
The difference was Bell had confidence that they weren't going to fine him for missing every single day. The CBA today mandates that they fine them. That's why Watt is there. Otherwise, Watt would be doing the exact same thing that Le'Veon Bell did. Make no mistake about that. There is nothing that you can say that shows that situation is different.
Exactly. It is exactly the same. So let's cap this off by asking it this way. On a scale of 1 to 10, should fans be worried about this whole situation with TJ Watt and his contract? How worried should fans be on a scale to 1 to 10? 1 being, nah, 10 being, oh, we may not have TJ Watt.
It all comes down to how you want to define it. TJ Watt will absolutely be playing in week 1. He's not going to not play. Some fans aren't going to see that as an issue. I see a team that is not making a run to a Super Bowl this year. So I see a team that is currently negotiating on a 5th-year option with their best player on a long-term deal. If they want to continue to build their franchise in a long-term fashion, which is what I believe they're doing based on the draft choices that they made, how early a lot of these guys are going to play. If they want to have their core group in place, I'm extremely worried because, well, he's not signed. It's that simple. He's not under contract with them next year. So they tag him. He doesn't have to sign that. He misses 2 camps in a row. He very easily can do that. To another point, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to jump around on this. Keith Butler had said he had not signed his contract yet, which can imply a couple different things. He has his option. His option was picked up. He signed that contract. So he is obligated to be at training camp. He does not have to sign the franchise tag they give him next year. So the situation is different next season. And the Steelers, they're not negotiating after camp. So really, to me, you're on the edge of an extremely difficult situation. And if it goes past camp without a contract in place, they're going down the avenue of a serious problem. Right now, I would say, honestly, a 5, because I don't necessarily think that TJ Watt needs to be participating in camp. I don't think that's the biggest deal for them to worry about, but it's a 9 in the sense that what they do now is going to affect them this time next year. So I think it's a mix of both. It's not going to affect this season, but they have a limited window in which they can get the deal done, and it will be an issue next season because he won't sign and he won't report to camp next year at all.
So Neil Stradamus, is he a Steeler? Is he signing a long-term contract?
I predicted the tag on this show back in April when we were first doing it. Everything leads into a tag. And I think it's simply because the Steelers don't give out contracts to the level that he's going to want. I wouldn't even be surprised if they tagged him twice. I think they're willing to do that. It's less cash that they have to pay up front. You keep in mind, you remember when the Raiders traded Khalil Mack? Everybody thought that was absolutely crazy. Well, it was. You know why they didn't trade him, or why they traded him? Because they didn't have the cash to pay him. They couldn't. They had to trade him. They got huge value for him, and I think the Steelers would listen. If a team is going to come back and offer this much money, you like what you see from Highsmith so far, you really should. You can get a veteran on the market, a guy like Mel Ingram. Who knows? Maybe they trade TJ, and maybe they sign Ingram to an extension that's a quarter of what Watt wants. They have options. They're not good options, but they have options.
I wish I had a drum roll because I would do it on this show. That's a terrible drum roll. But I'm going to go Landstradamus. I'm agree with you that he'll get tagged for next year, so he'll play this year and next year. I don't think TJ Watt will be a Steeler after he gets the tag next year. And it's largely because I don't think they will have identified the quarterback of the future. And I think a superior pass rusher on a team that does not have a very good quarterback in a division that has 3 quarterbacks, when you've got Baker, Lamar, and you've got Joe Burrow, and they've got their quarterback situation solidified, it just doesn't warrant paying that much money to a pass rusher, because look, pass rushers impact the game. They're not quarterbacks, though. I mean, who cares if you don't have a quarterback and superior pass rushers? You're not winning games 15-13 anymore. You'll still get your doors blown off. So I don't think TJ Watt will be with the Steelers long term. I think they're going to get 7 years out of him or 6 years out of him, and that'll be that. And to Lee Pate's point, I don't think he'll be a Steeler moving forward. Let's jump into another issue before we jump into the game, Thursday's Hall of Fame game. And we jump into the Hall of Fame ceremony and your thoughts about the ceremony. It was reported earlier this week that James Washington had requested a trade by Adam Schefter. Then Gerry Dulac came out and said that that wasn't correct. Tomlin came out and said that that wasn't correct as well. Now, before I ask you your question, define local media and national media. Are you national, Neil, or are you local, or are you kind of a hybrid?
I would probably be considered national. I am not actively covering any one specific team. I'm covering the news and the transactions of the league. So I would not be a local reporter. I also probably wouldn't be considered much of a reporter in this case. I'm an editor. I manage those reporters. There definitely is a difference, though, and I know where you're going with this. I would say, honestly, I can fill in the blanks with 99% certainty of how this happened. Adam Schefter did not make that up.
Okay.
Somebody told Adam Schefter that. I also believe somebody told the Steelers what they heard. It is not a one-to-one transactional relationship in the NFL. There are a lot of people that represent everybody. And a source, somebody close to the situation or the subject, that can mean a lot of different people. And they can have a vastly different interpretation of what's going on. I will say this, though, knowing the dichotomy of the NFL, as far as their communication goes, it's not a coincidence that probably, I'm going to loosely estimate, 75% of the news, the transactional news that's broken in the NFL, comes from Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport.
Yeah.
I will tell you this from experience. The people who are telling Schefter and Rappaport those things are agents. The reason they're telling those two is because they're the biggest. The reason they're the biggest is because they work for the outlets that cover, to the NFL, the most valuable rights holders, ESPN and their own internal network. They want the news funneled to these people. ESPN wants to pay the NFL, I don't have the number in front of me, $1.7 billion a year for 10 years. They want to be able to do that. ESPN wants to be able to get that information if they're paying that much money to air the broadcast, to air games. So what happens? They want the information. So the league makes sure that those guys have accurate information. I know that this royally offends Steelers fans. These things, it's not an accident. It's not a mistake. Adam Schefter gets paid, I'm not exaggerating, $10 million a year. He's not wrong. Okay. Somebody told him that. Somebody of importance told him that. Also, where there's smoke, there's fire. Did you see Chase Claypool Thursday? How good did he look? Washington didn't get to play. He's not getting on the field when 11's out there. That's the role that they asked Washington to play. The problem is, though, and this is where it all comes in, and I'm treading lightly on all this, Washington is a talented player. I like James Washington a lot.
Very good player.
I think he's going to get a pretty decent contract next season. When I say decent, I'm talking 2 years, $9 million, something like that. That's a good contract for a veteran receiver of the ability that he has. He's not a 180 catch guy or 180 target guy, but he's good. He can be a transitional role player kind of guy. He'd be great in Kansas City. I could see them wanting to pay him something like that. So
stop there real quick. Let me just ask you from a contract perspective. Juju's at $8 million. You see at $8 million. So do you see James Washington getting? I'm looking at the contracts. We got AJ Green at $6 million. Devontae Smith, the rookie, at $5 million. You have him somewhere in between $8 and $5 million.
I'd put him closer 4 to 5 tops. 5 might be kind of a stretch, a leverage situation for 5. He's probably a $4 million kind of guy, based on the teams kind of have the leverage of, well, you didn't have a whole lot, especially not your last 2 years. I can't go off your most productive year, which was 2 years ago. I have to look at where you are now. But the Steelers brought in Chase Claypool to play Washington's position. I don't think they brought Claypool in because they hated Washington. I think they took Claypool, and you're seeing clearly now why they took him. He was there in the second round. He shouldn't have been there in the second round. He's not second round talent. What they've done with Claypool is pretty remarkable. They got him to shed 20 pounds. He's going to be a beast. Claypool's going to have a big year. He looked really, really good physically. I know he dropped the pass, but he looks good. He's going to be a player for them this season. Washington just ends up the odd man out. You can understand why Washington would be frustrated, considering he's in a contract year. He doesn't have the ability to earn more on what his projection is probably going to be, because they're going to get the ball to Claypool come hell or high water. He's not going to leave the field. So that creates a bit of a problem. I am not at all surprised if Washington said to somebody in his representation, I want to be traded. I'm going to ask for a trade. That person then went to Schefter, who reported it. Things get blown up like they always do. Washington does an about face and goes and tells Tomlin, no, I'm not asking for that. I get it. It's cool. No worries. And then Tomlin goes and says, no, there's nothing here. Both of these things can happen. And oftentimes they do. It is not one person speaking out of both sides of their mouth. It's a lot of people who are involved in the situation, and no one's going to be named. Dulac isn't going to name anybody. Schefter isn't going to name anybody. And those are very likely not the same people. That doesn't mean, though, that Washington is happy with his situation. He just realizes, too, if he goes and demands a trade, the Steelers aren't going to get anything back. And the Steelers don't have any depth. That's the tricky thing with depth in the NFL. You have it until you need it. Then when you need it, it's gone. You don't have any more. Washington, to them, is far more valuable in the position that he's in right now than he would be on the trade block, where a team might give up maybe a 6th-round pick for him because he's in the final year of his contract. Yeah, there's no value to a team.
There's no value. You just wait, and if you think he's valuable, you wait till he's a UFA.
Exactly.
Let me get to Carmichael Steelers fan. Big up to Carmichael Steelers fan. I can be out in Carmichael every once in a while. Good old Adam Schefter. He's been reporting false news in the Aaron Rodgers situation. And I'm glad
it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. You can't tell me that it didn't happen. Clearly it did. Rodgers had to have a half an hour long press conference talking about it. All the stuff that Schefter said was what's happening behind the scenes happened. Okay, period. Here's
the thing I would say to Carmichael Steelers fan, and that's why I put up in the chat, fluid. So I would replace the word fluid. He said good old Adam Schefter. He's been reporting, I would say, fluid news in the Aaron situation. The point is, as you really well illustrated, is this is fluid. This is changing in real time. Like these conversations and stuff that's happening, it's changing in real time. So at one point in the day, he did request a trade, and then later he didn't. Both things are true. It's
Let's
not
keep in
one
mind too,
or
there's
the
there's
other.
not like a formal application that he has to fill out to
Right.
request a trade. He can just say that he wants to be traded, and somebody can fairly interpret that as he's requesting a trade. It's not a formal distinction. So if he's pissed off after the game because he didn't play and the only target he got was a terrible pass by Mason Rudolph, I don't blame him for being upset. He could have said it then. Plus, interestingly enough, you might have seen this on Twitter during the game. Des Bryant was proposing trades for James Washington. Maybe he has
Yeah, I
something to
did
do
see
with
that.
it. I don't know
did see
why.
that.
I don't know what the connection is between the two. But what else is Des talking about? It could be that. We don't know the veracity of whoever was making the comment, but where there's smoke, there's fire. James Washington seems like he would have a reasonable request if he did want to be traded. I don't think that that's out of line to suggest at all.
Yeah, and well, let me ask the last part of this, and then we'll just talk about him briefly as a football player. So, in these situations, who should fans? If I think we've done a good job of saying that both Dulac and Schefter were correct in their reporting, but they were just reporting it at different times. And it just happened. And it's kind of rare in this type of situation that it kind of comes out this fast, like this, where it's almost like in the same 24-hour period. But who should fans trust more? And that's why I asked you initially. Should they trust Adam Schefter more? Or should they trust Gerry Dulac or local guys more?
That's tough to say. I hate being judge and jury on people in the media just because I understand.
Or is it individuals? It's more so individuals, more so than a distinction of
I think
where you're at.
more than anything, to me, I'll say this. I'm 99.9% sure no one's going to agree with me. You can trust NFL media because of exactly what you put in the chat. These are fluid situations. The problem is who you don't trust are the people in social media that bend the situation around and create something that doesn't exist. And that's exactly what's happening here. Like I explained, what Dulac is reporting does not have to be contrary to what Schefter reported. Both of those things could have happened. On top of that,
right,
the Steelers are plenty motivated to not confirm that James Washington did not make this formal process that doesn't exist. He didn't request a trade. That's what they said. No, that did not happen. Does that mean that James Washington doesn't want to be traded? No, it just means that there is no formal process to request a trade. So for them to say he didn't request a trade, all that means is he didn't come up and tell them that's what they wanted. Okay.
Hey, Mike, if
anything, what that really means is we know then that Schefter's source is coming from Washington's camp, not Pittsburgh's. We also know logically as fans of this, as people who follow this, there's no incentive for the Steelers to trade him anyway. So why are they going to say that they want to trade him? It's not a question of who we believe and who we don't. It's a question of recognizing what the situation is and not just going off what some Yahoo with a fake name on Twitter says about the situation. They don't know, okay? Schefter is reliable. Gerry Dulac is reliable. You can believe what they say. Just recognize that one source can say one thing on Wednesday and another source can say another thing on Thursday, and both of those things can be true. That's what I feel happened here.
And I think it goes back to the root of it. Schefter is reporting information that he gets, and I trust that Schefter is reporting it. He might not be straining it, but he's reporting it. I mean, he's getting the information and reporting it. Lastly, on the James Washington thing, before we jump into your thoughts and our thoughts on the Hall of Fame game, I'm looking at a stretch. I'm looking at his game splits last year. There was a 4-game stretch where he got 6 targets. He got 1 target against Tennessee, 1 target against Baltimore, 2 targets against Dallas, and 2 targets against Cincinnati. He got 6 targets in 4 games. There's a lot of information, a lot have been made about Matt Canada and his new offense and so on and so forth. And I'll ask you your thoughts about that in the Hall of Fame game. Is there any way that he can get more targets? I mean, 6 targets in 4 games. That's just I mean, I can understand his frustration there. And I think what came out of this in our discussion of this is the one thing that's true about all of this is he's frustrated. But how does he get more touches? And in fact, his high of touches in a game was 7 touches against Cleveland when they beat Cleveland early in the season 38-7. Do you foresee him getting any additional touches this year? His total touches for last year were 56. What's his role in this offense?
There's a couple things with this that we need to remember too. You might recall there was a point after I believe it came directly after that cold streak that you just talked about, the 6 targets in 4 weeks. There was a point where Ben Roethlisberger openly said he wanted James Washington on the field more often.
Right, I remember.
At the same time, we saw a not coincidental decline in Chase Claypool's targets. They're playing the same position. So the Steelers at that point promoted, if you will, Washington. He got a bit more run toward the end of the season, and Claypool got less. Claypool was averaging like 8 targets a game through the first 10 games, I think, and then it fell off the cliff after that. Do you remember, excuse me, do you remember, I believe it was right after the playoff loss, a week or so after that, Bob Labriola of Steelers.com said, just kind of, in a chat sort of randomly, because of maturity issues with Chase Claypool, they weren't sure how reliable he was going to be. He said that it didn't seem like it really came from anywhere. There was the Claypool issue after the game where he dared offend people to say that he hopes that Cleveland loses the next week, as if that's a big deal. But along with Roethlisberger's seemingly odd timing of requesting that Washington get more and Claypool fall off after that, it seems to me like something happened with Claypool. I don't know what that would be, but I think, again, I've said this a couple times, where there's smoke, there's fire. It seems like Claypool rubbed people the wrong way. This is a franchise that tends to kind of use the media to put rookies in their place. They don't like rookies being too big for what they're doing. Claypool's a pretty demonstrative kind of guy. You could see him, perhaps being a little too sure of himself too early in his career. Maybe they put him on notice with that. Maybe Ben didn't like the work that Claypool was putting in and wanted Washington because Washington's put the work in. All of that said, I'll go back to what I had suggested earlier. Just one preseason game, I know, but Chase Claypool looked like he was an all-around stud. He did a lot of things, and he looked really good in the limited action that he had. We'll see how this progresses, but I see Claypool being a dude this year. I think he has the physical ability to dominate, which I'm not sure we necessarily saw that right away as a young player. He had a couple tricks, but not many. As the year went on, he was doing more and more, and he looks really good. It looked to me like they used him short, long in the run game. He was doing a lot right away for him. So as far as Washington goes, you can't put them both on the field unless you're going to change Washington's position, which they clearly haven't done. So all things being equal, if we're talking best player at the time, injury-free, I think it's Claypool. I don't think Washington's going to get a whole lot.
Yeah, he's going to get those 56 snaps. So I'm glad you talked about Claypool in his performance in the game. And so that will allow us to pivot to the game. Let me ask you 2 questions. I'm going to combine these 2 because we're kind of late in the show. What were your observations of the game, and how do you think fans should evaluate preseason games?
Let's start with that first. I think it's important to provide the proper context to preseason. They may have scripted plays. The offense, your team's offense, may have scripted plays going into it. In other words, we're going to run these things because this is what we want to do. They have not written that script up in relation to the defense that they're going to see. So what we see is a lot of what we saw in the first drive with the Steelers, a lot of great stuff and a lot of horrifying stuff. That tends to happen when you don't have any sense of what the other team is going to do, and you don't even care. It doesn't matter. You're running for execution. That said, I would say this, and the easy answer is about
real quick before you continue. That script, is that based on something that the coaches have seen in practice that they want to see run and see how guys execute it?
Yeah.
Or is the script just the script?
Your script, if you are scripting, which you're going to for most games. It's just easier. You get out there instead of thinking up something off the fly. You've got an idea what you want to call. It's basic stuff. It's stuff that you are going to call during the season, whether it's the exact play. It's simple things that they're going to need to rely on that season, and they want to see what everyone looks like while they're doing it. In fact, you might even see that same script used for the backups whenever it is that they come in. Just to give everybody a sense of this is what we run. We're evaluating you on these things because we know this concept is going to be something we rely heavily on this season. You need to be able to run these things well. And if you do, that's a leg up for you. If you can't, it might be the end of the road for you. So they want to have a plan of what they can depend on. And the guys that show that they can run these things are going to be guys that they want in the trenches when the bullets are flying. So
will they call that play twice to see if two guys play in the same position, how they run that play, so they have that play on film so they can evaluate?
They could call
the same exact play. Okay.
If they do it that comparatively, keep in mind too, I'm suggesting in this environment, it would literally be everyone is competing for a job. There are some guys there that have a job. You know, we know that. If it's stuff that they worked on in camp, there are things that they want everyone to be able to do. As a unit, the offensive line drilled heavily in outside zone. They ran outside zone a couple times early. They ran inside zone a couple times. That's a concept that they're going to use. However it is that they specifically use it is one thing. Seeing the line move in unison, seeing them in rhythm with the other players who are out there, watching them make the decisions that they make, those are all things that they can coach. They want to get that on tape because these are concepts that they're going to use when the regular season starts.
So what were your observations of the game? What stood out for you in the game?
I think the easiest thing everyone's going to jump on right away is the quarterbacks. But I'll say this. I don't think that we crowned a champion of the quarterbacks on Thursday. I thought we saw some good things from Rudolph. I thought we saw some good things from Haskins. I thought we saw probably more than those two from Dobbs. I thought Dobbs played really well. I was impressed with what he was able to do. It was a solid quarterback game. I'll bet they all graded out fairly well for what they asked him to do. Also, I have not seen the all 22 of Haskins. So
yeah, they don't in Game Pass. And I want to get Game Pass
for the preseason. They won't.
They don't put it out. Yeah.
No, that's a competitive thing, and you won't get that. So when people are talking about Haskins only checked down, we don't know what his options were down the field. We don't know if they blanketed coverage on two of them. What we do know is the difference between Haskins and Rudolph, was the throw to Claypool. Now, Claypool did not play with Haskins. He played with the ones, and he sat for the night after he fell on the ball after the big gainer that Rudolph threw to him. Great throw. Haskins did not have Claypool to throw to. Haskins did not have a situation where he got to see Claypool in single coverage on the outside. I like to think that Haskins would be able to recognize that and probably get him the ball if that was the situation. But it doesn't mean that Rudolph outplayed Haskins or anything like that. I thought both of them played well for what they had. Both of them made some mistakes, but they did okay. Beside that, though, what I was really impressed with, Lance, was the pass protection that we saw from the offensive line. I didn't expect that. Every quarterback had time. That was probably the biggest concern everybody had and has of the Steelers this season was the offensive line and their pass protection. I thought it looked pretty good. Conversely, I didn't think they blocked against the run very well, which I thought they would do. So for me, I kind of left it like, wow, I'm not sure who they're going to be. You know, I don't know. But Dan Moore started at left tackle. We saw that. They had, a group of ones out there. Otherwise, I don't, where I sit today, maybe somebody can put this in the chat. I don't know where Okorafor is as far as injuries go, but I know that Moore got the start at left tackle. I thought their pass protection looked pretty good. Now, I don't think Dallas blitzed a whole lot. I don't think they threw much, creative stuff at them, but they held up for what they were asked to do. I don't think they blocked on the ground very well. I don't think their run blocking, it didn't look particularly good to me. I didn't think Harris looked exceptional, probably mostly because of that, the lack of opportunity that he had. He did okay.
He got some
if it's a year, if it's a year in which Harris is going to have to make 5 out of, being hit at the 1. I don't know how effective Harris is going to have to be. Yeah, it's going to be a long year, regardless of what Harris ends up doing. He's going to get beaten up pretty good. I know that. And that very well could be the case. Harris is not a play-breaking kind of running back. So if that's the plodding, fall forward and get 2 more yards to try to move the chains, if that's what they're going to do, okay, but don't expect a whole lot from them, generally speaking. Then we saw exactly what we expect to see. But overall, I thought quarterbacks availed themselves pretty well. I really liked the way Claypool looked, moving, playing in space, blocking, carrying the ball. I thought he did pretty well. The handoff issue between he and Rudolph is a timing thing. I would probably put that more on Claypool than on Rudolph. He has to be behind the ball, regardless of whether he's getting it or not. He has to be behind the ball. The ball being snapped when he's past Rudolph doesn't do any good for anybody. He's in no man's land at that spot. If there's any value to the jet sweep, the ball has to be handed off before the runner gets to the quarterback. So there's a timing issue between those two. That's something you work out. Not worried about that. Claypool, to me, looked the best, I think, out of anybody of prominence on the team. Really like the pass rush. I like what I saw out of Highsmith.
Highsmith looked really good.
He's a good player. I mean, it's just like he isn't the sexy TJ Watt kind of pass rusher, but the dude just gets it done. He just lands. He's fun to watch. I really like the workman approach that he has. Not a great athlete. He just makes it happen. The one you and I were texting about during the game as well. I really I enjoyed watching Antoine Brooks. I thought it was like Mike Hilton. The Mike Hilton strategy on steroids. He looked more like an edge rusher than a defensive back. They were sending him on every play. It was like, wow.
I got to look at him some more. I got to take another look at Brooks.
I enjoyed his nose for the ball. He wants to be out there. He's the kind of guy that you want as a football player to see have some success. I like the way that they're using that nickel position. It's not they're throwing it back at the offense. Great, you put 4 receivers on the field. My guy's here. Come hell or high water, my guy is here, and I'm going to use him as a rusher. If you don't feel the need to run a receiver around him, he's going to rush. He's not going to drop back into his own. They did that with Hilton. It just seemed like Brooks did it more often than Hilton ever did. I liked his makeup for that. He's going to be fun to watch. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on the rest of preseason.
I think, to your point, they sent him that much to see how good he could do it. And that's part of the evaluation of him, I think, as a player. They want to see him and see if he can do that, because I think that's critical to what they do on defense. I thought overall, it was solid. I mean, it's a first preseason game. The one play that jumped out to me in terms of a signature play was, I like that they were able to punch the ball into the end zone in the red zone. I think with Balaj late in the game and the movement that they got, being able to put defensive linemen's heels in the end zone. I thought that was a solid play there. Other than that, I mean, for me, at least this early in preseason, I think it's critical that everybody comes out of the games, not being hurt. So overall, I kind of liked what I see. I mean, UG3 with the missed tackle kind of stood out. Kind of a lack of physicality there. I mean, but it's not much to take. I think we'll see a little bit more next week. I'm not sure if Ben will play again next week. He probably won't play till, I would guess, the 3rd preseason game. I do think there is an opportunity for Haskins to possibly be the number 2 quarterback. I don't think the Steelers are saying it's an open competition, but if he won the competition, I don't know if the Steelers would necessarily be mad. It's kind of one of those. But the last point I want you to make on this game before we talk about the Hall of Fame ceremony is you talked about the grading of players. There was a very interesting play with Justin Lane, who got beat on a dig, but hustled and created a turnover. How do coaches grade that play? Because he did get beat, but he did hustle and make a good play and cause the turnover. How do coaches grade that?
I think exactly as you describe it. There was, I don't know if that was the best coverage we've ever seen. Coverage is not as pass-fail as people think that it is. Okay. It's hard. It's a completions league. The NFL has done everything it can possibly do to encourage pass completions. They want to throw the ball. As a defender playing inside of a zone against 5 receivers, passes are going to be completed. Now, did Lane compete particularly well for that off of the stem of the receiver? In other words, when he breaks, was he there competing for the space? Probably not. I don't think he looked as quick as what you would hope to be able to try to get in there. But at the same time, defensive backs today, especially when the ball is up in the air, the receiver goes up, they will sometimes, and some of this is to avoid the penalty and the fine, they're going to let the ball be caught and then attack it because you're not hitting the guy's head that way. It's a vulnerable spot for the receiver to go up above, his shoulders, catch the ball, come down, without the friction of your feet to help support taking a shot from the defender. I think you credit him with the fact that they were able to wrench the ball away. Now, I remember the play. I don't want to misspeak and give the wrong guy credit, but Lane was the one who caused that, right? He came to the ground. Lane took the ball away or punched it out from behind him. From behind. And a nice recovery on the play, which is what the defenders did. Now, 10 years ago, you would have had 2 guys launching from the tips of their toes into the receiver's chest and trying to dislodge the ball. You can't do that anymore. So the reality is, for them to make a play at that spot on the field after a good throw, good catch, that's what they have to do. So to some degree, I think Lane is okay in that situation, and you're going to have, obviously the result of it is pretty advantageous for Pittsburgh. So you want to be able to credit him positively with that. Giving up the catch in and of itself in the middle of the field, you can't score a whole lot off of that situation. I'm not saying that he didn't lose the play to some degree, but for me, I would have to evaluate the entire play, not just the coverage piece of it, because they're going to tackle a lot of catches. That's the NFL. Right. The worst quarterbacks complete 59% of their throws. So it's not, no longer are the days where we have, Joey Porter teeing off the edge on a Bengals also ran quarterback who's going to complete 4 of 15 for that day. We don't have that anymore. It's really pretty much impossible to say a quarterback is going to complete fewer than 18 throws. It just won't happen. Right. They have to be trained for after the catch. That's today's defensive back.
Well, I got to get my Cleveland Browns dig in. Baker Mayfield may be less than 50% on a day, but
we've seen that. We've seen that.
We have. Sometimes
it's week 6 or whatever that was. 6.
Sometimes he feels dangerous, and
sometimes he just is dangerous to his own team.
He completes more than those, and that's a good perspective. That's kind of how I see it. I wanted to just give people listening to this show a lens to it, that the play is whistle to whistle. And it would be kind of hard to grade play to micro chop plays and grade those. And it was probably the complete play in which he got graded on. But let me give you my thoughts on the Hall of Fame game. Give me yours, and then we'll get out here and let people know what you got coming up next week. Troy, I don't know if people saw Troy Polamalu's comments, but I think those resonated with me about, and I was glad that Troy recovered enough from COVID and was able to clear protocols to come out and be able to do that. That would have been really tough, not being there in 2020 because of COVID, and then him catching. That would have been just a rough for him. But I think he talked about it best, about what it means to wear the black and gold, the standard that means, and just when you've done it right. When he talked about how the legends would say they would want you to play with us. And I think it just shows the type of organization that the Steelers are, that you have 5 guys going to the Hall on one weekend, and you've got front office, player personnel, and Bill Nunn Sr. Big up to Bill Nunn and his family. Big up to those guys. My family is close with the Nunn family. Coaches, front office, coaching, and then players. You need all those 3 elements to be a successful franchise. And it just dawned on me. It's generational. You got Nunn to Cower, then you got Faneca, Troy, Donnie, Shell. It's just incredible just how good and how consistent this organization has been over the last 50 years. What did you take away from the Hall of Fame ceremony?
I just think these things always make me feel kind of old.
Well, I'm older.
I'm at the point where it's like, I watched these guys in my adult years and seeing them up on stage, it's like, wow, they look so young. Isaac Bruce looks like he could still be playing.
Right.
Steve Hutchinson doesn't look old. We really got to know these guys. You know, we're past these are the guys of my childhood. Now it's
Right.
the adult days. And in my generation for the Steelers, Troy Polamalu was the mean Joe Green. You know, he
Right.
was the figurehead of everything. Troy was the most popular player on the team by far. He's the legend as far as we're concerned. We grew up in our adulthood with Polamalu. I was a senior in college when they drafted him. And I remember you saw the highlights of him and, you know, just how explosive he was, how strong he played the game. And the general thought was, this guy's not going to last 3 years. You know, he's going to kill himself out there. And maybe he did. And he just played through it anyway. But the plays, and you saw that man's highlight reel last night. He did that. I mean, you put all that together. If you were to put 5 minutes of film of Troy Polamalu together, you'd leave out 3 hours worth of plays that are very similar to it, first off. And secondly, it's barely human. I mean, just on a play-by-play basis, the stuff that Polamalu did on the field, it's unbelievable. And watching him up there put on the gold jacket, it feels less like legend and more like friend. You know, this is the guy that we knew. We grew up with this guy. He's your buddy. I mean, it's I'm not trying to trivialize anything to do with Troy Polamalu. It's just it's such a completed feeling to see a guy like that receive the honor, which we all knew. You know, we knew Troy was a first ballot Hall of Famer 14 years ago. You know, it's not like this is any surprise. To see that kind of in a culminary fashion that it's done for him now. Part of me is just kind of hollow. You know, as great as Minkah Fitzpatrick is, how much fun it is to watch him for his own stuff. He's a totally different player, but that's the safety now. It's like, yeah, but he's no Troy. I mean, it's just there's the nostalgia of youth that comes with that. You know, not childhood, but adulthood, early adulthood. In my 20s, it was going ballistic on the field anytime Troy Polamalu was out there because Troy's going to do something. You know, we never thought anybody would jump over the pile. And he did. Kerry Collins didn't think he was going to jump over the pile. Troy landed on Kerry Collins. Kerry Collins wasn't a small dude. Okay, he's 6'4", 220. Not a small dude. Polamalu landed on top of him, and Collins crumpled like a soda can. I mean, it was just unbelievable to watch. It was just, he was so unconventional of a player to be able to see that honored in such a way. And it's not just Steeler Nation that loves this guy. It's seeing everything that he did on the field and everybody else appreciate, and seeing other Hall of Famers say the same thing about him. It really felt kind of, you know, proud. It was like he's one of us. It's completely ridiculous, I know, but it was great to see that. I'm looking forward to seeing Alan Faneca honored a very similar way tonight. Longer overdue for sure. Not Donnie Shell long overdue, but long overdue. And we're happy to see our guys get this honor and be able to kind of go back into that mentality and that perspective and live again for a little bit.
Yeah, I think you said it best when you said our guys. And I think that's what it means, you know, when you're a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and you're a fan of the black and gold, it's our guys. And I think, you know, of my age, I'm 51. So, you know, I was very young through the curtain era, and that's where I got my love of football. It was passed down to me from, you know, all my family living on the north side and being connected with the Rooney family as being North Siders. And it's that our guys, the boys. And that's what the Steelers are called, you know, in Pittsburgh. It's the boys. You don't even call them Steeler players, or at least maybe that's generational. You know, the boys gonna play on Sunday. I mean, I grew up hearing that, you know, every week. And so it was great to see Canton turn black and gold. What do you guys have for the fans of Steelers Wire or the Wire Network this week?
We're going to see what comes up out of the Hall of Fame for sure. That's a great thing too. I'm a football junkie. I'm not just there for the Steelers. I love the history of the game. I love now, especially because I really got a firsthand look at all these players. I got to see them go out and compete and become the legends that they are. So for me, yes, it's definitely, exciting to be a Steelers fan and watch all of this. But there are a lot of great guys tonight. A lot of great sites that we have that are going to honor the players who were there. I watching John Lynch, I think, is kind of fun. He had good, exciting film if you're big into hits and things like that. Not 100% sure John Lynch is the first guy I'm thinking of when it comes to the Hall of Fame, but he's there. There's nothing really we can do about it now. It's fun to see all of that. It's fun to see fans sharing their stories about different players that they watched, in their youth, in their early adulthood, seeing these guys, show up and create their legacy. Peyton Manning, obviously, is somebody that we know very, very well. Seeing that on that stage one last time before that's kind of the end of it, to reach that point, I think is a lot of fun. And we're trying to get that spirit across to the audience on every site that we have that has somebody going in tonight.
I wonder if Tom Brady will beat Peyton Manning tonight again in a Hall of Fame championship game. But I just had to throw that in there because he beat Peyton Manning and the Colts so often. But that's incredible, man. The Colts getting 3 guys in the Hall of Fame and like in the same week, and that battery of players was absolutely ridiculous.
Edgerrin James, man, one of the most underrated players of that era. God, he was
Marvin
good.
Harrison, and I mean that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yep. Don't forget Charles Woodson. That's sadly somebody I just forgot to mention. I idolize Charles Woodson. Absolutely loved that guy, and he got better each year he played in the league. Just a true all-time great, in my opinion. That guy, he played corner, he played safety, he just played defense, and he was good at it. He was good in coverage, he was good against the run, really smart. He was a playmaker, he tackled. Charles Woodson, a phenomenal player. It's amazing to me that he's just now getting in the Hall of Fame. That guy got drafted when I was in high school. It's insane how long he played.
He's first ballot though, right? He just played so long. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Real quick story.
Years.
Real quick story before we get out of here. I met C. Wood at a party, and real cool guy at a house party. Ironically, man, he's a tiny guy, man. Yep. C. Wood is not big at all. If you saw C. Wood, it was hilarious. The hilarious thing, because he's an Ohio guy, and he went to Michigan, and the cool thing about it was I was going back and forth, of course, being a Steeler fan, first thing I'm saying is, what's up, C. Wood? Go Steelers, right? That's the first thing. I mean, I'm the obnoxious Steeler fan. So, we're going back and forth. He hates the Steelers. I was like, oh, dude, you from Cleveland. I get it. I mean, you're a Hall of Famer, and you still got a chip on your shoulder. You're from Cleveland. I understand. Everybody can't be from Pittsburgh. Great dude. We're going back and forth the whole party, ripping each other. And this was, I think, right after, it's very close to when he retired, because I think he was moving to Florida or something. He was going to go work for Fox or one of the broadcasts or something like that. I think it was right after that. But a very cool, very humble dude, totally a Cleveland guy, big Cavs fan, and the whole 9 yards. But listeners, thank you for hopping onto the program. We went a little bit long, but I think it deserved it. It was a big weekend of football, big weekend at the Hall of Fame game and at the Hall of Fame ceremony. And the TJ Watt thing is real. I think it's a real thing that Steeler fans need to be a little bit concerned about. But with that, we're going to conclude the program. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.